All right, hi everyone. How's it going? And welcome to another video. Now, today I would like to do another movie review, and the movie I'm going to be reviewing is the 1977 film Looking for Mr. Goodbar. It stars Diane Keaton and Richard Gere. So, yeah, I want to do a movie review on this. Now, this movie came out in 1977, so, there will be spoilers. I don't know if I need to say spoiler alert. But, if you want to see the movie first, then I would recommend watching the film before you watch this video. But yeah, this movie is actually kind of hard to find. I know it was on video, and as far as I know, it was not released on DVD. At least that's what people say. And I don't know why that is. I did hear something regarding licensing involving the music that was in the film, that had something to do with it. But yeah, this is kind of a hard film to find. I know it was on YouTube and then I think it was taken down. I believe it's back on YouTube now. But yeah, this is a very striking film. It definitely left an impression on me, so much so that I thought it would be worthy of doing a movie review on. Now, Looking for Mr. Goodbar is actually based on a 1975 novel of the same name, written by Judith Rosner, and apparently the novel sold very well. Sold about 4 million copies, as far as I understand. So yeah, it sold really well. It allowed Judith Rosner to become a full-time writer because apparently, I guess she was just like working on an article based upon this story, because this story is based on a real true crime that happened. And she was researching the true crime and was going to write an article on it, but she thought it would make a better novel. So she wrote a novel, and then in 1977, the novel was made into this movie. So now the movie in this whole story is based on the real life of a woman by the name of Roseanne Quinn. And Roseanne Quinn was a woman who had lived a double life. She was a teacher by day in a Catholic school teaching deaf children, and by night she would hang out in these singles bars and bring men home to her apartment and have one night stands. So that's what it's about. Anyways, Diane Keaton plays Roseanne Quinn, and it starts out when she was in college, and this professor was having an affair with her, and I guess he was married. He came off like kind of a jerk, I thought, and then I guess their relationship ended. She goes back home. You can see she has kind of a tumultuous home life. I'm pretty sure that the movie followed the, actual person pretty well, but she did have a tumultuous home life. There was a lot of fighting between herself and her father. They would get into all these arguments. She had a sister that she seemed to get along with. Her sister is played by an actress by the name of Tuesday Weld. And Tuesday Weld was actually nominated for Best Supporting Actress for this role. But Diane Keaton is really good in this film as well. And in my opinion, she should have gotten an Oscar for this role, but, more on that later. But, anyways, this character, this Diane Keaton character, like I said, she's living this double life, teaching these deaf students in this Catholic school by day. She really tries hard to keep her life separate, to keep her daytime life separate from her nightlife. And eventually, she meets all these kind of like kooky characters. Richard Gere plays one of these characters she meets. Now, Richard Gere usually plays a lot of these like nice guy kind of characters. That's not the case in this film. In this film, he plays a character that's very nutty, kind of unhinged. And he'll frequently gets into arguments with the Diane Keaton character. and she usually ends up kicking him out of her apartment. And at one point, like, I guess he gives her some drugs. Eventually, she starts getting into drugs, and her life just starts spiraling downward. And she could no longer separate her daytime life from her nighttime life. Her nighttime life starts bleeding into her daytime life because the Richard Gere character gives her a drug or a pill, and she ends up oversleeping, and the students are very mad. So, a lot of problems keep escalating for this Diane Keaton character, this Roseanne Quinn. Now, that continues to happen. Things just continue to get worse and worse. And then, she starts seeing another guy, and this other guy, like, her parents approve of. I guess he's some kind of like counselor. He's a nice guy, but for some reason, she treats this nice guy terribly. They don't really say why, but she just treats him really bad, and she goes for these other guys that, like I said, are kind of nutty. Like this Richard Gere character, and eventually, there's situations where this Richard Gere character hits her, and there's a lot of screaming, and the neighbors come in, and supposedly that was what really happened. Those kinds of incidents really happened to this Roseanne Quinn person. And eventually, on New Year's Day 1973, she decides she's had enough, that she's not going to live this life anymore. She's going to have like maybe one more one night stand, and then that will be it. She'll be done. And kind of like almost reminiscent of like those movies you see, it's like about a gangster or about a drug smuggler, and he says, I'm going to do one more deal and that'll be it. Well, a lot of times that last deal goes wrong, at least in the movies. That tends to be what happens. So, anyways, the nice guy gives her like some gift, I think like a strobe light. And so she has this like weird flashing strobe light. And that'll become kind of important later because it does kind of add atmosphere to the final scene of the movie. Add this real creepy atmosphere to the final scene. But anyways, she goes to this bar, and the nicer guy is there. He tries to talk to her. She yells at him, and then she walks up to this other guy. Now, this other guy is, in real life, it was an individual by the name of John Wayne Wilson. In the movie, he's played by Tom Berenger. And she starts talking to him. She thinks he's a nice guy. However, the viewer already knows for sure that he's not a nice guy because the viewer already sees that he's kind of an unstable individual. A couple scenes before this, you already see this is kind of an unhinged character, just like the Richard Gere character, although this guy is probably worse. And anyways, she brings this guy back to her apartment. I guess she says, okay, one drink and then you're out of here. So I guess it was just kind of like an after hours thing. I guess that was all she really wanted to do, was kind of sort of like an after hours hangout kind of thing. And they get to talking, and then he mentions that he was in jail. And, she's like, well, what for? And he's just like, well, this and that. So he doesn't really give a clear, definitive answer. And then she wants him out, and he snaps. He throws her on the bed. The lights go off, but the strobe light goes on. And the final scene is him stabbing her to death 18 times. And then the strobe light is flashing. And the final scene is the strobe light just flashing. And then it ends, and the whole movie ends, and it's over. So, you realize that, she was always kind of walking on thin ice. That something like this was bound to happen. I mean, you just knew it. And that's exactly what happened. She brought the wrong guy home, this unstable guy by the name of John Wayne Wilson. Now, the movie ends with, showing her face in the strobe light. That is a very eerie scene, very creepy scene, very unsettling. Now, when I was in college, I took a film class, and in the film class, you talk about Albert Hitchcock, and they'll show you maybe The Birds or Rear Window. They'll also show you Psycho, and they'll talk about the Psycho shower scene as being this very suspenseful scene, and what a genius Albert Hitchcock was for creating this scene. But I tell you, this strobe light scene, it just I don't know that the Psycho shower scene had nothing on this strobe light scene. Nothing. It was definitely a scary scene. But yeah, I mean, it is. I'll say it is a disturbing movie. I mean, it definitely is. I don't know if you call this a horror movie or not. I guess you could say there's kind of like two kinds of horror movies. There's more like fictional horror movies, and then there's like horror movies that are more realistic. And that's what this is. It's definitely more realistic. And you had these kind of movies coming out at this time, these more realistic horror type films, like Taxi Driver. And I guess that's what George Lucas meant when he said around the time Star Wars came out, you had all these, street films coming out. I guess he was referring to movies like this when he said street films. But yeah, just like very true to life movies. They don't make movies like this anymore. I guess you could say they kind of tried with movies like The Joker, but I don't know. I thought that felt kind of flat compared to something like this. Something like this just seemed more real, and it's largely because it was based on a true story. The true crime novel came out in 1977, the same year the movie did. And I know critics were kind of have some bad reviews on the novel, some good ones. But with the true crime novel, they did say, and I did hear some mention of the fact that the dialogue may have been made up, because, would have had to have been. I mean, the writer of the true crime novel didn't really have any idea what the characters really said. But, yeah, anyways, Diane Keaton really delivers a great performance in this film. I do have to admit, she should have won the Oscar for Best Actress in this film. However, she actually won it in 1977, this same year, for Annie Hall. So, yeah, she won it for Annie Hall. Annie Hall actually ended up winning Best Picture of 1977, beating out Star Wars. Now, I'll admit, I think Annie Hall is the best Woody Allen movie, in my opinion, but it's no Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars was just a game changer. It really was. I always wondered why Star Wars never won the Oscar for Best Picture, because I always felt it should have. But anyways, yeah, getting back to the film, like I said, it ends with that strobe light scene with the Diane Keaton character getting killed. And they don't actually say that she died, but you just assume that she had gotten killed. That, she found the wrong guy, and this is what happened. Sort of meant to serve as a cautionary tale. Sort of meant to serve as a cautionary tale. And I've even heard people who've, said they have seen this movie and they were a bit more cautious of people as a result. So yeah, that's what the movie was meant to serve as, kind of a cautionary tale. But yeah, definitely has a freaky scene at the end. Now, the movie doesn't actually get into what happened to this John Wayne Wilson character after the murder. Now, supposedly what happened was he wiped everything off, everything he had touched in the apartment, and then he went back to I believe it was an apartment of an individual by the name of Gary Guest. And Gary Guest was a gay man that he was staying with at the time. Apparently, this John Wayne Wilson was living in Florida, and then I guess he was married. And then he left his wife. He became like a drifter. And then he moved in with this gay advertising executive and was staying with him when this happened. And he told Gary Guest what he had done. You know, he told him about the murder. Gary Guest gave him some money to fly back to Florida. John Wayne Wilson flew back to Florida, got his wife, and flew to his parents' house in Indianapolis, Indiana. The police then received information from Gary Guest that he was in Indiana. Gary Guest gave him his address. They went to his house. They arrested him. They extradited him back to New York, and he was in his in his jail cell. Apparently, he was on suicide watch, but one of the guards gave him a bed sheet. And before his case could even go to trial, he hung himself in his jail cell. So that was what happened to John Wayne Wilson, the murderer of Roseanne Quinn. But yeah, like I said, if you like true crime kind of things, you might like this. I know there are some people who like true crime, but if you do get bothered by these kinds of movies, I know some people do get bothered by this sort of thing, this kind of gritty realism, then this is not the movie for you. But yeah, I do kind of like watching these films sometimes. It's not the only kind of film I like, but I do like these, gritty 1970s realistic movies. Somewhat of a breath of fresh air from what you have today with a lot of these superhero movies, and they're all kind of, cartoony, a lot of CGI. So, yeah, definitely a movie worth checking out if you get a chance. Like I said, it's hard to come by, so you probably will have to find it on YouTube. Anyways, yeah, so, that's all I've got. If you watched this video, as always, I thank you for watching. Have a good night.